Hello learners, I'm Professor Laila Simon from the Department of Management of the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. Today we are going to learn on what is rural marketing and how to do research on rural marketing. Well, the way we heard rural marketing, the moment we hear rural marketing, what strikes our mind is all about village, the agricultural products, the open market space, and so on. That's what it clicks to all of us. So it's basically, the moment we hear rural marketing, we think about some selling, or maybe the farmers comes into play. That's how we picturize the things. So selling of the rural products in the rural, but also at the urban areas. We cannot survive without the urban people, cannot survive without the help of the rural population. I'm sure. So when I talk about rural marketing, we are completely dependent on the rural people to get products which are of our daily use. According to the National Commission of Agriculture, rural marketing is said to be a process which starts with the decision to produce a saleable farm commodity. That's what we normally say, something which is agriculture based. And it involves all the aspects of market structure or the system, could be both functional and institutional, based on the technical as well as the economic considerations. It also includes the pre and the post-harvest operations, assembling, grading, storing, transportation, and of course, the channels of distributions that we've been learning in words of marketing. Let's have a look on the nature and characteristics of the rural market. Agriculture, as we said, is a main source of income, and this income is of course seasonal in nature. We have come across a lot of episodes of farmers not getting the actual cost of their production. We have come across episodes where the disappointed farmers committing suicide, maybe the farmers throwing away the products like the tomatoes, forgetting just ₹2 for a kg, and so on. A lot of incidents to mention. It's also very fluctuating as it depends on the crop product. It's very unpredictable. Any unforeseen calamity is happening. We cannot predict how much would a farmer make at the end of the harvest. So we look at as when the characteristics, the markets are very large and diverse, but are geographically scattered. Linguistic, religious and cultural diversities and economic disparities do happen. You look at a mela in a village, you find people have a particular kind of a traditional perspective. You go to town B, you find there's another way of looking at and hosting a mela or a fair. So it all depends on the cultural perspective of that particular rural region. These markets are undeveloped and mainly due to adequate purchasing power is very less most of the time. Largely agricultural oriented with a poor standard of living, low per capita income, and the social cultural backwardness. Though it exhibits a very sharper and a regional preferences, it does have a distinct predilections, the perceptions, how they look at the things, habit patterns, and behavioral characteristics. The initiation and the management of these social and economic change of the rural sector is basically the core behind every rural marketing process. If we move on to what is rural marketing research, it's just the same steps as we do a normal research, but we would look into the concentration is more on the rural market, the rural people. So how do we define it? It could be the systematic design, the collection, the analysis, reporting of data and finding the relevance of these data in specific marketing situations. That's what is very important. It's not that we just come out with some conclusions and findings and it just remains in books. We need to plan up these marketing strategies using the outcome of these researches that has been done. Let's have a quick look at what are the steps. As every research design or the steps involved for research, we have to define the research problem. So the topic of identification, the problem could be more of a rural touch pertaining to the rural market. Once we have identified this research problem, we can finalize the research design. And then we set up the research hypothesis. What are the possibility of the assumptions that we take and how do we go about it? With the objectives and the hypothesis well in plan, we can design the methodology in which the sample, the right population has to be taken up and what methodology needs to be kept in mind. With the methodology focused, we can proceed to the collection of the data. Again, we need to think on what are the kinds of the tools and the techniques, what are the ways in which the survey needs to be administered. Remember, it's not very easy to get a survey done with the rural crowd. We'll be looking at what are the challenges when we do a research at a rural area, then the things that we need to keep in mind. Once we have thought about how the data has to be collected, we collect them and then the data needs to be analyzed. Following which, we would work on the conclusion, the suggestions and the recommendation. And then as I already said, what is very important is how the data that has been concluded, the findings that has been concluded would be implemented for the right development of these rural areas. That's what is more important. So, a retake on what we have learned, the 7 steps. We define the research problem, we finalize the research design, we develop the hypothesis, we plan up the research methodology, we start collecting the data. Once the data is come, we have to filter, sort and pick up the relevant data and just proceed for analysis. Once the analysis is done, we would be driving up the conclusions and the recommendations, and the most important, as I said, is to implement these outcomes which would help in framing up new strategies for the rural market. How do we collect the data and what are the different kinds of the data that we look at when we do a rural marketing research? As every research, basically we have the primary data and the secondary data. The major rural studies are concentrated on quantitative techniques and of course qualitative techniques. We look at the sources of collecting the primary data. How do we collect a primary data? Because there are a lot of challenges for collecting the primary data. As already said, many times the respondent would not get the actual meaning of what is being expected. Sometimes it's very difficult to communicate to the rural crowd. So you need people who would help you to communicate your questions in the local language and you get the result. And it's not that easy that the rural people would come forward to give you all the information that you need in a day or two. So the ways in which primary data can be collected could be getting into fairs, getting into the village choppers, the retail outlets, or even huts. These are the places of common visits by the villagers, and the researchers can get primary data collected from these places. Looking into the methods, there are a lot of. We have the in-depth method, interview method. We have the focus group discussion method, social research, which is participatory in nature, wherein I become a part of that particular community and I start behaving the way these community to understand more about that community. This actually makes them very comfortable and they would come out with the answers that we would want to. Questionnaire is not much advisable, but of course a good scheduling can definitely be planned up for such collections of data, and a right kind of a sampling needs to be kept in mind. Looking at the secondary data for collecting the informations, we of course can have from the Census of India. We can also have from NCAER, which is the National Council of Applied Economic Research. We can also have from CSO, which is the Central Statistics Office under the Government of India. We can also have from DRDA, which is the District Rural Development Agency, and Panchayat Office is another very easily accessible source from where we can get the secondary data. But then what is more important when we look into the rural marketing research is the limitations and the challenges. Looking into what is the nature of the rural market, with the scarcity of the rural market is, you need to have a lot of budget for doing a market research. You need to go, stay, you have to interact. So things are a lot of time and a lot of money is involved. Lack of uniformity in the secondary data. Most of the time, the government data, many times what we need is not easily available. So these are of course a very hardcore challenge that is faced by the researchers to do rural research. Accessibility, which is one thing which is very much important while we are collecting the samples. To get a sample which is actually representing the population, it has to be kept in mind that the sample should be accessible. We should be able to access the people, go and there has to be a comfort zone. Lack of facilities are there in the rural areas. Comprehension of research tools. Not much of rural tools and techniques are aware among the researchers who would want to do a rural marketing research. And of course, very important thing is the sensitivity of the rural crowd. That is something which needs to be kept in mind. So here are a few tips that goes as a do's and don'ts in the rural market research. We need to be one among them. As I said, it's more of a participatory. So you need to be in a dress which is as simple as a villager. That is where they start accepting you as not as a person who has come to query them, but then they understand that they've come to help them out. Familiar with local language or accompanying a known person. If I'm not able to use the accent or the words or the language which is easy for them to understand, it's very difficult to communicate. So it's more advisable to take somebody who is understanding the language, who's able to commute in the way these people would want to hear us. Spend time with the villagers even though it is not needed to. You need to spend time with the researchers. It's not that you get into the village and start asking and collecting the data because you don't have time. Paucity of time may bring about such things, but you have to be, this is a very sensitive area and you have to spend a lot of time, you become friendly, and only then is that you would you would be able to get what you actually want. The purpose and its benefit. How is your presence there or your collection of the data going to help these villagers needs to be made very clear in the language which they understand. And the issues which are sensitive needs to be very carefully handled. There's also something which is important is, if we want to do a research and if our sample is more of a female dominant area, we have to take utmost care in asking the questions, like not asking the question directly to these females, but then asking them, taking their husbands or the male members of the family into confidence, and then in their presence asking these questions can help a lot and can help you in collecting the data. I think you have understood the whole steps of rural marketing research is similar to what a normal research is. But what is more important here is, I need to be one person among the villagers and should stay with them to win their confidence, to make them understand that I am here not to harm them, but to help them with some good initiatives that would be helpful for the growth of that rural sector. I'm sure you understood how to go about these techniques and to capture the data, which is very much required, because if you looking at researchers are not having much of time, and India is very much agriculture dominant, and I think a good research in the areas of the rural community would make a lot of sense for the development of our country. We've been saying avoid one-to-one interact. You might have seen these villagers when a new person enters a village, you'll find a crowd of people coming to you to know why are you here. So you need to avoid one-to-one. You need to make them comfortable. You can't say that I'll be talking to only one person to get the data. No, the whole community as a whole, they are just whole. So we have to adjust the kind of the way they want us to behave, and it could not be the way we want to behave, right? So the researchers can always carry food, and of course the villagers, that doesn't mean the villagers won't give you food, but then it's always good to have your own backup. And then as soon as you get into the style of the villagers, you are a part of the community and they start accepting you, then they feel that yes, and they you will not have all these kind of challenges. So I am sure you are going to do some kind of a small research which can help develop the community which is nearby in the area that you live. Thanks for watching, and I'm sure you enjoyed this video.